Hello and welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm your host, Prudence Robertson. The FACE Act. On this special edition of Pro-Life Weekly, we're here to answer all your questions about the FACE Act. 2024 marks 30 years since this law was enacted. Peter Breen of the Thomas More Society explains what the law says and what it means for pro-life Americans. Jailed for rescue. We know of 8 pro-life activists who just spent Christmas and New Year's in jail based on felony charges under the FACE Act. We recently visited the site where they're being confined in Alexandria, Virginia. Kristen Turner of the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising shares details about the conditions there. What comes next? As we embark on a new year, more and more pro-lifers could be affected by laws and regulators that seek to stop our important work. We take a look at how Americans can be on guard as they help to save babies from abortion. Hello and Happy New Year. 2024 marks the 30th year since the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act was enacted. This law is more commonly known as the FACE Act. It was signed by President Bill Clinton in 1994 in reaction to a wave of pro-life protests and sit-ins surrounding abortion facilities as people attempted to save the lives of the children whose mothers were walking inside. The Department of Justice says this law prevents, quote, violent conduct intended to injure, intimidate, or interfere with the right to seek, obtain, or provide reproductive health services. But many pro-life groups say the Biden administration unfairly uses the law to target those individuals seeking to rescue babies from death by abortion. In 2023, the Department of Justice indicted 8 pro-lifers under the FACE Act. In August, the department convicted Herb Garrity, William Goodman, Lauren Handy, John Hinshaw, and Heather Idoni. And in a separate case a month later, Joan Bell, Jonathan Darnell, and Jean Marshall were also found guilty. These advocates are currently being held in a detention facility in Northern Virginia while they await sentencing, and they could spend up to 11 years in a federal prison. We recently spoke to one of Lauren Handy's lawyers, Peter Breen, Vice President and Head of Litigation at the Thomas More Society. He explained more about the FACE Act and why it's deeply concerning that so many pro-lifers have been indicted in recent years. Peter, thanks for sitting down with me today.
Glad to.
Peter, a lot of more than usual number of pro-life advocates have recently been charged under the FACE Act, and this is something that your firm has been very involved in. What is the FACE Act?
Well, and so the FACE Act is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. It really has 2 parts. One is it is intended to stop what we would call the clinic rescues, where folks would go and they would peaceably sit in front of the door of an abortion clinic. You know, so it's a very peaceful thing. It draws its genesis from the American Civil Rights Movement, which itself then goes back to Mahatma Gandhi in India. So the very, very peaceable nature of it. And so unfortunately, the pro-abortion side, with the enactment of the FACE Act, turned that into a federal crime. And so that is that's a great shame that we would do that at a federal level. There's no need for that. There are local laws that deal with it. On the other hand, the FACE Act is being used against pro-life advocates on the sidewalk, and it has been used in both the Obama administration and the Biden administration to try to shut down legitimate, appropriate sidewalk counseling. And so you saw that in the case of Mark Houck,
yes,
the pro-life advocate in Philadelphia, who was charged 2 counts of FACE Act violations and then dragged out of his home by 20 FBI agents first thing in the morning. A horrible, horrible instance. And so really, when you look at the way they've used the FACE Act now, trying to say that legitimate, legal sidewalk counseling is somehow illegal or somehow obstructive or a violation, that's where we've been dealing with those issues with Mark Houck. And again, so that's where the FACE Act is right now. Right. Under the Obama administration, they had tried to say that when you are doing your sidewalk counseling ministry, that if you're talking to someone who happened to pull into an abortion facility in their car, well, you're obstructing the car behind them. If it was any other issue beside abortion, the government wouldn't get near it. They would respect the fact the First Amendment protects your activities.
Right.
But again, we're having to fight that very great battle to try to defend our First Amendment rights against the FACE Act.
Yes, thank you for explaining that. And you mentioned Mark Houck. Thankfully, he was acquitted of those charges. Recently, a number of pro-life advocates in D.C. were indicted under the FACE Act. What was your reaction to that?
It's understandable. They did an old school rescue and live streamed it to Facebook. So in terms of violating the obstruction part of the FACE Act, I understand why that indictment was made. The problem there is a normal FACE Act indictment is a 6-month misdemeanor. It's like a trespass charge. And so if you undertake civil disobedience, the theory is you are laying your life on the line for the babies and to make a statement to the public. The problem is this. The Biden administration didn't just charge them with just a basic FACE Act. They charged them with a 10-year felony conspiracy against rights. They treated them worse than major drug dealers and also called it a crime of violence, such that if you had multiple FACE Act convictions, you would be treated like a 3-strikes-you're-out person. And so this is really the place where the Biden administration has gone beyond any prior administration. Not even Obama administration was doing this. Wow. To attack these folks. And when you look at it, Congress was very clear. FACE is not meant to be this major felony when you go and sit in a clinic. They had lower penalties when you do that. But instead, the Biden administration is just running roughshod over both the intent of Congress and common sense. These folks have not committed a massive, serious felony crime of violence as is being charged.
Interesting. And Congressman Chip Roy on Capitol Hill has introduced legislation that would repeal the FACE Act. Would you be in support of that?
Yes, and we've been in support of all of that. And of course, with the way Washington is split right now, it's tough to get any movement on a substantive piece of legislation. But what you hope is by calling attention to this situation, maybe we'll get the attention of some folks in the court system so that maybe higher up in maybe the courts of appeal or the Supreme Court, we can get some action to stop this overcharging where they're, again, calling these folks, violent felons, which is just, it's an outrageous slander against the pro-life movement and these brave advocates.
Right. Peter, before I let you go, we live in the United States of America. Our nation was founded on the right to life. And at every corner, it seems like there's litigation against that basic fundamental right. Did you ever think that we would be at this point in our nation's history? And can you offer us any hope and encouragement for the future?
Sure. Whenever you come to a pro-life conference, you've always got to deal with this. So you don't want folks to get complacent, and so you want to make sure to give them the unvarnished truth of what's happening. But at the same time, there are incredible causes for hope. So in the pro-life states, look at all the babies being saved. But in the pro-abortion states, say like in Illinois, where your abortion rate is skyrocketing, other states like similarly situated. So we've got to have different strategies. But we're winning battles. We won a big injunction recently against an anti-pregnancy center law in Illinois. And that was the whole pro-life movement coming together. The activists came together, the legislators and the lawyers, and we were able to go into court and get great victories there. We are fighting back against the other side at every turn. And in part, the reason they're attacking us so hard is because it's working. Our advocacy is working. People are becoming more pro-life in their day-to-day lives and in their individual decisions. So that's the hope. I think the issue, too, we are in a time of great change. Time of great change across the country, every issue. But in the abortion issue, we're still post-Dobbs, and folks are still trying to figure out, well, what do I do now? How does my state regulate it, what have you? But I'm seeing so many causes for hope in the states that are pro-life, and then even in those those states that are pro-choice on abortion, we are having sanctuary counties and cities for the unborn. We're doing all sorts of good things there and defending the First Amendment rights of Sidewalk advocates so they can do their job and offer real alternatives to women in need.
Peter, thank you so much for sitting down with me and for sharing all your wisdom with us. Grateful for all the work that you do.
Hey, it's great to be with you.
And now we bring you to the Alexandria Detention Center, where these 8 pro-life advocates are being held. We went there with Kristen Turner of the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising, also known as POW. She told us about the conditions these pro-lifers have endured now for months. Since September of 2023, 8 pro-life activists have been held in this Virginia detention center just outside of Washington, D.C. Their crime, attempting to rescue unborn babies from death by abortion. These pro-lifers were indicted under the FACE Act of felony charges and could face up to 11 years in prison.
These jails are human dog cages. They treat them horribly. I mean, it's freezing cold in there right now, and the rescuers are suffering. And of course, they know that they're suffering for the babies. We need to stand up for them because when we defend rescuers, we defend babies.
These interventions at abortion facilities, or as POW calls them, rescues, are often peaceful. Pro-lifers will enter a clinic and ask expectant mothers to leave alongside them. And their goal is to save children from a brutal death.
These rescuers bravely decided to put their bodies in between babies that were scheduled to be killed in Washington, D.C. in 2020. They went into an abortion facility whose abortionist is known for committing heinous crimes against children and even killing them after they're born. He admitted this on camera in a 2011 live-action undercover sting operation.
But instead of D.C. abortionist Cesare Santangelo, it's 8 pro-life people who are now behind bars. We spoke to one of them, Herb Garrity, via phone.
I think when I first got here, it was very, very difficult. The conditions early on were pretty rough. I was in solitary for a while, and at that point, it was quite difficult. But at this point, I've been moved to general population, and I believe all of my fellow co-defendants have been too, though I'm only able to see most of them at weekly church services.
There's been an uptick in arrests of pro-lifers who attempt rescue since March of 2022, when Lauren Handy and other POW members exposed the brutal deaths of over 100 babies at the hands of Santangelo, including 5 children who were likely born alive and left to die. They have come to be known as the 5.
All of the signs continue to point back to Cesare Santangelo's abortion facility in Washington, D.C. We've seen some of the first rescues in history happening on that campus, and then we saw the justice for the 5 babies. All the signs continue to point back to him. He is our Kermit Gosnell, and we asked ourselves so many times, how did they let Kermit Gosnell do what he did? The justice for the 5 babies are still awaiting autopsy. It's been a year and a half. These 5 babies are still at the medical examiner's office, and the mayor is blocking an autopsy for them. We need autopsies for these babies to prove once again that Cesare Santangelo is killing children after they're born.
After members of POW uncovered the 5, they, along with other direct action activists, were charged for a different rescue they attempted back in 2020, in which they used chains and bike locks to block the entrance to Cesare Santangelo's abortion facility in the Foggy Bottom neighborhood of D.C. That's why they're in jail now. What's the common thread? And why are these arrests happening now, so many years later? Here's Kristen's take.
Well, the Biden administration is coming after activists from every cause right now, but we know that just in this year alone, over 12 pro-lifers have been charged with the FACE Act. They're coming after us as hard as they can because they know that this is the way to end abortion, to end the funding that they're getting from the abortion industrial complex, and they're scared.
POW has argued that the FACE Act is unconstitutional because it's predicated on a right to abortion that was invented by Roe v. Wade, especially now after the Dobbs decision, in which the justices said point blank the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion.
If you peacefully enter these abortion facilities in order to stop abortion, if you block access to abortion in any way, you can be held accountable on a federal level and face up to 10 years in prison. This law, it's unconstitutional, and it was predicated on Roe v. Wade, which has since been overturned, but it was still used against these rescuers to imprison them and try and stop them from taking direct action to save the lives of these children.
Here's what Herb had to say about the law that put him in jail, and that could perhaps land him in prison soon.
Now it's unequivocally clear that there is no constitutional right to kill your child. And so the idea of a federal law that hyper-criminalizes one specific type of free speech, particularly free speech that is saying that abortion is a crime and it is violence against a human being, hyper-criminalizing just that type of speech and that type of behavior compared to the slap on the wrist that you get for any other type of nonviolent sit-in, I think is egregious and it's inappropriate. And so I think that the FACE Act should have never been passed, and I think that at this point, it needs to be repealed.
We also asked him if he regrets the actions that landed him in jail.
No, I'm going to continue to be present at places where they're killing children and offering resources so that people don't feel as though that's their only option.
Herb and his co-defendants are scheduled to be sentenced to prison in May of this year. Coming up, we share more about the people who have been impacted by the FACE Act. And we hear an important perspective from Lauren Musica. Her group has a different approach to saving children's lives. More details up next. You're watching EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Prudence Robertson. Welcome back to our program. Some might wonder what motivates certain pro-life activists to protest abortions by putting themselves in the line of fire, knowing that they could face jail time for their tactics. To help answer that question, we take a look back at our interview with Father Fidelis Machinsky. We spoke with him in July of 2022, just after he spent time in jail for carrying out a lock and block style rescue. And you have been arrested several times for participating in non-violent rescues like this one, and you're not the only person who has responded to abortion in this way. How do you respond to people who think that your way of defying abortion, trying to end abortion, goes a step too far?
Well, I would respond by simply asking, imagine if you were one of those children scheduled to be executed that day. Would you not want every possible effort to be made to save your life? And saying that something is a step too far is simply saying, well, some lives are less valuable than others. We could sacrifice only up to a point, and then we'll let these others die.
While some advocates choose to take these more direct actions, like Father Fidelis, it's not the only way to save babies. Many in the pro-life movement have different tactics. Lauren Musica, president of Sidewalk Advocates for Life, empowers people to shut down abortion clinics and save moms and babies. Her team is also committed to helping pro-lifers understand what their rights are while sidewalk counseling. When we recently spoke to her, she emphasized what makes her group effective.
We actually have robust legal rights within the confines of the First Amendment that we can have peaceful conversations. We can invite those conversations. We can hand out information, and we don't need to worry about necessarily the FACE Act or some of these other laws that sometimes the other side, even a weaponized FBI and DOJ, would love to slap on us, right? So the important thing is that we continue doing what we've always been doing here at Sidewalk Advocates for Life. When we aim to be peaceful, prayerful, loving, law-abiding, right? We have the means to reach out to all sorts of clients for hours in front of a facility and love people and help people and serve them where they're at.
Many of you likely remember the case of Mark Houck and his family, who were accosted at their home due to unfounded FACE Act allegations. On an early September morning in 2022, Mark Houck, his wife, and their 7 children were awakened by a horde of FBI agents at their Pennsylvania home. The agents handcuffed Houck and took him into custody in front of his family. The reason for this violent arrest? The DOJ charged him with violating the FACE Act, accusing him of pushing an elderly pro-abortion escort outside of Planned Parenthood. In February of 2023, Houck was acquitted of all charges and joined our program to discuss the raid, his acquittal, and how he's taking action against the FBI and DOJ. He also recently announced that he's running for Congress. Let's take a look back at his story. Mark, hello, and congratulations on the recent verdict from the jury. We at EWTN have been praying for you, and we're really glad to welcome you onto the show today. Talk to me about why you've decided to sue the FBI.
Well, thanks, Prudence, for the time, and all glory be to God for the victory. And, well, the reason that we're going to pursue justice in this way is because the government and the Department of Justice, FBI, need to be held accountable. And they need to know that they cannot discriminate based upon viewpoint, and that's really what was the issue here, is that because I was a pro-lifer, because it is post Roe v. Wade, all that, that they came after me in an overly aggressive way. We agreed that we would come into the city of Philadelphia to present ourselves should we be indicted, and there was no need to put my children in danger. There was no need to intimidate, humiliate, and scare, potentially harm my children and terrorize my family.
Sure. And Mark, I want to focus on what you said to those agents that morning before they arrested you. You said, "I know why you're here. You're here because I rescue babies." Mark, why have you chosen these abortion mills as your battlefield?
Well, it's the primary battlefield of the day, if we can use that terminology. It's a fight that is the most important, and we engage in that battle in a spiritual way. It's a spiritual fight, and we know that there's powers and principalities involved in the evil of abortion, and so we take our weapon, our rosary, our prayers, and our fasting, and our charisms to help women and men in a difficult situation. And so all life and everything begins with in the womb. So if we don't get that right, we're all in danger. And so we have to begin there as the primordial battle of the day.
Yeah. And Mark, I'm sure it's not easy to think back on this, but would you share with me and our viewers how those FBI agents treated you after the arrest, once they had taken you into custody?
Sure, happy to do it. The journey was a difficult one, but we rejoiced in the trial and the persecution. So I was taken to the federal building in Philadelphia, about 100 yards away from Independence Hall, where our rights were established. And so when I got to the federal building, I was shackled in my belly, shackled in my feet, and chained to a table for 6+ hours. I don't know if that's normal standard procedure or not. Doesn't seem to be, but nonetheless, we will be learning more about that over the coming months. And then I was transferred to the U.S. Marshals in the same fashion, shackled. When they were at my house, they didn't allow me to put any clothes on. They didn't allow me to get socks on. They didn't allow me to say goodbye to my wife and my children. It was done in a way to humiliate, as I said, intimidate, and instill fear, and especially in fear in pro-life America.
Houck and his wife filed lawsuits against the FBI and DOJ in November of 2023. They are seeking more than $4 million in damages from the Biden administration. At the time of our recording, the government has not yet responded to the suits. Houck told EWTN News Nightly correspondent Eric Rosales that he hopes this lawsuit gives a voice to his fellow pro-lifers who have been indicted under the FACE Act.
My heart goes out to them, and they have my prayers, and I know some of those people personally. So, I encourage them, and I hope they're encouraged by this, because it is an injustice. This FACE Act is unconstitutional, and its application is completely lawless.
And what happened to Houck and his family has moved him to run for Congress. He says in his platform, quote, "I have seen firsthand what an out-of-control government can do to its citizens. I will fight to protect all people and their rights under God and our Constitution. My platform is based on common sense." That does it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Prudence Robertson. Don't forget you can find us at EWTN Pro-Life on all social media platforms, X, Facebook, Instagram, we're there. And if you're interested in more news from our nation and world, go to EWTN.com/pro-life and sign up for our newsletter, The Pro-Life Pulse. Remember, life is a gift. Your life is a gift. God bless.